Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today, I'm going to be going back to the non-Overwatch League esports specific days and videos. Today, I wanted to talk a bit about Tracer London Calling Issue 1, which we got last week. We have a new comic. I know it's been a week since since the comic came out, that I'm now actually making this video on it, but I want to talk about it a little bit. My thoughts on it, and the comic challenge, all that kind of stuff. Break it down a little bit, and give my thoughts on it. So if you haven't seen yet, Overwatch released their first new comic since, I believe, April of 2018. So it's been a long time since this comic, since last comic had come out. This is the first comic in a series of collaborations with Dark Horse Comics. So we are talking some legit comics now from Dark Horse Comics, and of course we have Overwatch Tracer London Calling, issue 1 of 5. So with actual comics, like serious long form issues of comics, and this one follows Tracer immediately following the events of the collapse of Overwatch. So that's not immediately following, it's just after the collapse of Overwatch. We are now following Tracer as she tries to kind of be a hero in London and do heroic things, and struggles to do so. Overall, I actually really enjoyed it. I thought it was a good start to a comic, and it's nice to see them kind of going this route with the comics, where they're going to have, I guess, like issues to focus on specific characters and comics to focus on specific characters. I would have liked if they started with a character other than Tracer, just because we have so much information on Tracer when compared to other heroes. However, I think starting with Tracer makes a lot of sense when you consider the fact that Tracer is the mascot of the game and really is kind of the face of Overwatch. If you're going to start a comic with Dark Horse Comics and you're going to really bring these comics back, it makes the most sense to me to do that with the character that everybody knows and loves, that is Tracer. So I think it's interesting, and I think that is really cool to see them having comics again, just in general. But it's really interesting to have Tracer now be the face of the future comics that we're going to get. And it's 5 issues, obviously, which means we will be getting 4 issues beyond this one. And we'll be getting 1 comic a month. At least that is what Jeff Kaplan has said, how long we can expect to get comics going forward. So I think that's cool. I really like the Overwatch comics. I think they're pretty good. I wish they were more connected, and I think this might be the way that they do that. At the moment, they're really just not connected whatsoever. Each comic is very, independent of the other comics, and you have the Zarya comic where she's going after Sombra, which is connected to the Sombra animated short, but it's completely separate from any other comic that we have. And there's certain things that are kind of like recurring themes in comics, and I think that's what'll be interesting about this Tracer comic is London Calling is going to start talking in the next issue about the death of Mandata and the assassination of Mandata, something that we have seen in an animated short. So not in a comic for that one. We've seen it in an animated short. Of course, we saw it in the Alive short, I believe is what it was called, the Widowmaker one. So stuff we've seen, we can kind of see a different angle of it, potentially. I know Tracer had some other comic-related content in the past. I know Emily has been in comics. She may have only been in the Memories comic, or Reflections. I think it's called Reflections, now I think about it. That may have been the only comic she actually appeared in. I'm not 100% positive about that, but I think that's the one she appeared in. But I feel like she has had some appearances in other places as well in the comics. Because I know that she was revealed in the comics, so my assumption is just that was kind of where we've seen her, but this may only be the second comic she's actually appeared in, because she's in some sprays in game and whatnot. But I digress. Anyway, I really like that we're getting comics again, and I think that we're seeing a lot of really interesting stuff this year when it comes to lore, and we're seeing how the Overwatch team wants to approach lore going forward, which is very nice to see. And we're seeing a lot of changes to what we saw when in 2019 there was nothing. 2019 was barren. There was one animated short in 2019, and it was the Overwatch 2 reveal animated short. Whereas in 2018 and 2017 there were 2 animated shorts. This year we've had none, but I'm sure that COVID has had a lot to do with us not getting any animated shorts, so I'm not going to complain as much. But in 2018, it didn't really matter as much because we still had a comic in 2018. But in 2019, it was literally just, here are your 2... or 2019 was this one animated short, and they started doing short stories instead. So it seems like they were kind of moving away from comics, moving into short stories. Obviously, this year we had a couple of short stories, or only the Mercy one, in addition to the Arisa Jr. novel, and now the Tracer comic. So we're starting to see the Overwatch team finally expand once again the storytelling mediums that they have, which I think it makes sense. Obviously, they're going to start ramping up story content as we get closer to Overwatch 2, and as we get closer to the game that has a heavy focus on story content and PvE content. It makes sense that we're going to start seeing this story content, but it makes me very happy to see that they're starting to move once again in the direction of story content and give us story content that isn't just the Archives events. Because as much as I love Archives, we didn't get Archives this year, or new stuff from Archives this year. It was all reused from 2019 and 2018 and 2017 with just some kind of changes to the way the events work. So I'm glad we're seeing changes go forward with the way Overwatch storytelling is being done, and that means they're just embracing all of their different mediums. And comics are something that Jeff Kaplan had kind of teased a little while ago, that they still had big plans for the comics, which to me made it seem pretty clear that they were going to be working with somebody to publish more comics. At the time, we just didn't know who that would be. But seeing that it's Dark Horse, that's a good one. Dark Horse is a very well-known comic publisher. They put out very good comics from everything I've seen of them. I'm not a huge comic reader. I've read all the Overwatch comics, but aside from that, I don't read a ton of comics. So this is a somewhat, unexplored medium for me in a lot of ways. And I enjoy it. I like the art a lot. This one in particular had some really great frames, or great pages, or I don't know the correct term. I really like, one of my favorites is, it's like the second page, when it's just like the full page spread of Tracer hearing someone that needs help. I really like this one. I'll put a picture of the page up during the video, but I just like this one a lot. There's so much life in this one still image. You can see the people on the streets, you can see the expressions on the Omnic's face to Tracer's left, you can see all these people on the right side of the frame, these couples that are doing their thing. The woman whose dress is getting blown up because that sounds awful. The wind is blowing the dress up because Tracer is moving very quickly, and you can see there's like a blimp airship thing in the back, in the top. You can just see how like massive the London skyline is. It's a medium that is really interesting to explore and great to see, and the art of this comic from the wonderful, I believe Babs Tar, I believe, is the artist, with Mariko Tamaki being the writer. It's really nice, and it's really cool to see, and I'm a huge fan of what the comic is. And it's interesting just to see that it's going to explore the further relationship between the humans and Omnics, especially in London, where we know there's a huge disconnect in terms of their cultures and societies, where the humans don't really like the Omnics, and they oppress the Omnics, and they force them into the underground, whereas the Omnics just kind of want equality, and they want to be equal to everybody else. So I'm really interested to see how this comic goes. I like the story a lot. It's a nice, engaging story, and it's a very central story to kind of Overwatch's lore, is the conflict between humans and Omnics, in their terms of like the actual physical violent conflicts that happened with the first and second Omnic crises, as well as numerous other things with, the Guishan Omnics in South Korea, and the further Omnic stuff with Null Sector. Humans versus Omnics is such a central part of Overwatch's story, so I like that we're getting an exploration of that here in the comic, something that we've seen in different outlets. I would like to see the comics explore things we haven't really seen. I'd like to see the comics progress the story forward more. Obviously, I don't expect that until Overwatch 2 happens. I don't think they're going to push the story forward yet with comics. They're going to keep going back. But at least we're getting multiple issues where we can really dive deeper into this problem. We can explore this social aspect of the Overwatch world, and we can see how the human-omnic relations have been impacted by years of conflict, obviously both violent conflict and just civil conflict, social unrest between humans and Omnics, and the way that Null Sector has kind of impacted London as a whole, and King's Row in particular gets super, super, super impacted because of the uprising that we see in the uprising event. And of course, it's all going to tie in, I imagine, to Overwatch 2, where we know that Null Sector is a major player in the story of Overwatch 2, and the plot for Overwatch 2 has a ton of connection to the Null Sector stuff with Talon. So it is really interesting. I think there will be a lot that plays into it. I'm excited to see more about Mondada, especially because Mondada's voice is the voice of Overwatch 2. So I think it's really interesting, the direction this comic's going to go. I'm very excited for it. I might make more videos breaking down the comics as more issues come out each month. So we'll see if people like this and want more of it. I will certainly do it. I'm not going to do... I mean, this one's obviously not too in-depth because I would love for people to read it. I will link to the comic in the description down below if you haven't read it, as well as to some articles, or at least one article, about the kind of creation of the comic Tracer skin, which I didn't really talk about, but it's a nice skin, and there's some interesting stuff in here about just the character of Tracer in general. As Arnold Sang says, people may know Tracer as the poster girl, but she's not just a character we use on covers and posters. She also encompasses the values of the game, the universe, and the Overwatch development team. The hopeful optimism that she brings, her style, everything about that character was very instrumental to us finding the identity of the game. And I think that's a big part of why Tracer was the character chosen for this, because she's not only the face of the game, she is the game. She represents so much about Overwatch in general, and I'd like seeing her story be kind of the first one we really get to be told. Because as much as we are missing lore for characters like Lucio and Diva and Zenyatta, and some of these newer heroes like Moira or Brigitte, and there's so many missing pieces about things like what happened in the Swiss headquarters, what happened with Reaper, like what is wrong with Reaper. We know that in some way his face is misshapen, deformed, and grisly to look at because Anna's scared reaction that she sees in the Reunion comic, I believe is what it's called. Whatever that comic is, where Anna and Soldier fight some Talon operatives in Cairo. I think it's interesting to see stuff like that get to explored more, but I think for a starting point, this is an interesting comic, and I think that it in particular is a very interesting perspective to talk about and to look at, because it is really central to the story of Overwatch. And I hope that with Overwatch 2 and the further development of the story in that, we'll be able to get more comics that kind of dive deep into the world of Overwatch and what's going on. Because I personally am a huge Star Wars fan, and Star Wars expanded content is really, really good at filling in a lot of the gaps that you have from watching the movies or the TV shows. But the problem with those things is typically you can't get the gap filled in until you have the information at your disposal already that is progressing the story forward, and then you can kind of go back and fill it in later. And because we haven't moved the story forward yet with Overwatch 2, I think we have to just wait until that game comes out before we start seeing things kind of make more sense, and we start to make a lot of connections between what's going on in every different part of the Overwatch universe. But I'm excited to see more story content. and I hope that you are all excited as well. Let me know in the comments down below your thoughts on this Tracer comic, if you're excited to see more of them, if you wish that we had more content or, other comics instead of this one, a different character focus. I, for one, am just happy to have comics, and I'm happy to know that it is a 5-issue comic, meaning we will be getting more in the coming months. That makes me very happy. But that is all I have for you today. If you enjoyed, consider liking and subscribing for more content like this in the future. Hope you are all staying safe and staying healthy, and until next time, bye-bye.